Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. We're here to talk Seahawks football. We've got our second show in our long off-season series looking at draft prospects. Today is the running back class of 2025. It's a big loaded class from, top 10 to pick 200. There are probably at least 25 running backs that have draftable grades, I think, in this draft, possibly more. Keith and I are not going to talk about every single one of those, but we're going to highlight some guys that we are interested in that think that would be good fits for Seattle. Although we can have a little conversation if you want about where Seattle sits currently with its draft or with its running back room, Keith, and if Seattle's going to even be in the market. And if they are going to be in the market, what kind of running back are they looking for?
Well, I think they are going to be in the market, but just because if you want to be a team that is physical and runs the ball well, you need to always be adding backs to your system and go get guys that because like Ken Walker hasn't been able to stay healthy the last couple of years. He's missed a considerable time. And so maybe you're like, okay, let's have a fourth back. So when he goes down, we still have three. And you got to keep doing that. Plus, Walker's going to be a free agent after this next season, and maybe you don't want to spend the money that it'll take to keep him, and you just want to, keep a young player on a young contract as that spot in the backfield and let someone else pay him. And so I think I don't really expect them to go with an early pick, but I expect them to get a pick, and to pick up a running back that fits their system, fits their needs, and is someone that they think can project into a role.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, especially the part about Ken Walker and a contract year and potentially adding a fourth running back, given the fact that even today they had Kubiak up there holding a press conference with Mike McDonald and reiterating the idea of establishing an identity for the offense. And that identity is kind of mandated from Mike McDonald. And he wants the identity that the defense has, a physical team that's going to dictate terms to offenses. He wants his offense to be able to dictate terms to defenses, become physical, be able to run the ball, have a balanced offense, and so forth. So those sorts of things to me point to the idea that a fourth running back might not be so crazy, especially with Ken Walker's situation being injured now and again. Also, they may have a more specific idea of the type of running back that they want to bring in that will kind of transform that identity for the offense a little bit more. And it does start with the running back. It starts with Geno Smith. Obviously, it starts with the offensive line, but being able to run the ball effectively in the way that you want to be able to run the ball, I think is going to be really important for this team.
I would agree. I think that you have to. None of the running backs on the roster were chosen by this coaching staff. Not, we have a new offensive coordinator and a bunch of the offensive staff, but I mean also like head coach Mike McDonald. They were all on the roster before he got here. And he wants a particular style team, and that's going to be one that's physical and tough and all of that. And maybe the guys that are here don't fit what he wants. At some point, he's going to get the roster he wants. And, it's worth looking at and seeing, okay, what type of player does he want back there? Does he want, guys like Walker who can fly? Or does he want guys like Charbonnet that are just pure power? Like, we don't know yet. And that's kind of the key part there.
And it would go hand in hand with kind of the offensive line that they want to establish as well, I think. The good news for Seahawks. Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is John Schneider is still the general manager and loves to pick running backs. Um, the good news is that if he's going to pick a running back, this is a great draft to be able to do that. This class is loaded top to bottom with great options, all the way from power gap type runners that are 230 pounds that still have some juice. When they get outside, they can give you some extra yardage after contact, all the way down to 185-pound guys that are change of pace guys, catching the ball out of the backfield and so forth. Can maybe offer some kick return opportunities
Mm-hmm.
for you. So it really does bridge that much of different styles.
Yeah, I didn't think about the
And
kick return part when I was going through. I was looking at, like Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee and was like 190 pounds. No, he's not what Seattle's looking for. But when you bring up kick return, I'm like, oh, actually, they need a kick returner. This is a team without one. They ditched the ones they had and went out and, grabbed a guy off waivers who was 160 pounds to return kicks for the last like 8 games. Um, so yeah, a guy that can maybe give you something as a third down back, but also as an elite kick returner is something that I didn't consider, but definitely something that this team may be looking at.
it's hard because I would, if all things are created equal, I would avoid those guys as well. I'm just not interested in a one-dimensional back. But when it's your fourth guy on the roster, maybe it is a guy that specializes in something and he does it really well. That could make some sense, and maybe we should be thinking about that a little bit. And also, maybe it's the 230-pound guy that can run a 4.8 that can do both things really well. You mentioned the idea of power and gap versus outside zone. There are a few backs in this draft that can do both pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's just get into it. I did want to start at the top only because even though Seattle, I don't think is going to be in the market, I think it would be a shame to not mention Ashton Genty,
Oh
the
yeah.
Boise State running back. I watched some tape on him today, and he's described as 5'9", 215. I would say 5'9" is generous. I would say this kid
Oh
is at
yeah.
like 5'7" and a half, 5'8".
Yeah, we'll see what he gets at the
And
combine. He's not
yeah,
big, but he is fast and he runs with power and he runs with
yes.
balance. And
And he's very productive.
oh man, I'm like the size doesn't matter, right? And it's how do you change direction? How much power do you have? Like, I don't care that he's 5'7" or 5'8". Like this kid can run and he is special.
The only thing, Keith, that gives me pause about him and why I probably wouldn't take him, even if I was in the market for a running back early, and I might opt for another couple different guys, is the fact that I think that at Boise State he was quite often made it past the line of scrimmage without being untouched. Now that was a combination of his burst and decision making, but also the offensive line blocked well for him. And it was Boise State. They played in a conference where his
Yeah, they played
competition level
a
just
bunch of
wasn't
crap.
great.
Yeah.
So once he got past the linebackers, he was gone. I mean, he averaged like what, 8 point something yards per carry in college.
Mhm.
I mean, legitimate home run speed. I'm not going to take that away from him. But in the NFL, when you've got the athleticism of defensive lines and linebackers, I'm worried that he's going to get knocked off his game a little bit in the timing that he's been used to, and slowed down at the line of scrimmage and stopped. And I don't know that he has enough power to overcome those sorts of things. And the other issue would be pass pro, pass blocking, and protection for his quarterback. Is he a 3-down back in the NFL? I don't know that. I can't tell that from watching him, if he's going to be on the field all 3 downs, or if he's going to be limited to just, you know, catching the ball out of the backfield in the NFL. I think
Who was
that
the guy last year that Atlanta took in the first round? You were really high on him.
I'd have to go back. I can't do that, but hold on.
I was just gonna be like, I was like, okay, would you rather have Genty or that guy. I can go back and look at last year.
Let's
And get you a
see here.
name if my
Is it Trey Benson?
no.
Jalen Wright, Jonathan Brooks,
Maybe it was the year before. Damn, I hope not.
Marshawn Lloyd, Ray Davies, Braylon Allen, Will Shipley.
Must have been the year before.
Okay. Isaac Garendo. Is that
No.
the guy? Okay.
No, that was
Yeah, it
last
must
year.
have been the year before.
No, it was a guy that was at the first round, right at the top of the draft. And you and I were, I was
Oh,
like, I don't want to,
yeah.
I don't want to
The
take a
kid
running back
from
that early at
Texas.
all. And you're like, no, this kid's special. And we had that
Mm-hmm.
debate.
Yeah, that was in 23.
And I would go back and maybe it's just, remembering our debates and whatnot, but I'm looking at Genty and I'm like, I would take him first.
Yeah.
And
Bijan Robinson.
there we go. Bijan Robinson. Yep. To Atlanta. And
I mean, he is
I think
elite. There's no question. I'm not going to take away his talent. He's elite. He's got the contact balance, the rare combination of the burst and the long speed. His vision, he shows that he's got that workhorse ability to be a 3-down guy. Just not sure. I think, I've seen this movie before. It just is going to take a minute for him, I think, to kind of get used to the idea that his running lanes are going to squeeze on him a lot quicker in the NFL. He's just going to have to adapt. So, but nonetheless, a top 10 talent in the draft. Now, to me, that's the only running back in the first round. There's a few second round guys and third round guys I would love to have on the Seahawks team. And I don't think this time that, based on our current roster, that John Schneider would go up and get one of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And if he did, though, I really like Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina, 6 foot, 220 pounds. He looks big. He runs big, 4.46 40. He's 21 years old. There's just a lot to like there. Very productive, violent runner. Could be part of that identity thing that Seattle's wanting to establish as far as an identity on offense. But we've already got like a Charbonnet on the roster. Now this guy's going to be a little quicker than Charbonnet, squeeze through those holes a little bit more, but we do have Ken Walker still on the roster. So you got to kind of weigh that out. You kind of also look ahead maybe to 2026 and find out what that draft class looks like, because running backs, you can kind of plug and play first year, second year, and have pretty decent success.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that we would pass on a guy like that in this draft.
Yeah, because it's too early to take a guy like that. It would just waste on Seattle's roster needs and everything. Good player. I like him in some schemes better than others. I'm not sure he's a perfect fit for Seattle's stretch zone that they're going to run under Kubiak.
He's
But
pretty complete. He's pretty complete. I mean, I think he can do both power and zone plus receiving out of the backfield is like, and pass pros.
I'm just saying like he's a guy that you want him running downhill, and stretch zone you're going to be running laterally, and you got to put your foot in the ground and go. And I want, if I have Hampton and I'm putting together plays, I want him running downhill at people.
Yeah,
because he runs. Yeah, he runs with power and yeah. I'm just saying, I think that's a better fit for him. Is more of a downhill running game.
He kind of reminded me of Sean Alexander just a little bit. Like you watch him and he kind of glides at the line of scrimmage, and then he bursts. He's just got this quick little burst once he finds that hole. Super fun to watch. Okay,
definitely.
So another guy in that same mold is Travion Henderson. I think the running back out of Ohio State, a little smaller, but very productive. Little faster. Older prospect as well. Yeah. 22 and a half years old by the time the season comes around. Still, durability is kind of an issue. I would probably take a pass on him, although I do believe that he's probably the most complete running back. Like he can do gap, zone, pass, catching out of the backfield. Just the durability and the speed thing is going to come into play there. So why don't you talk about a couple of prospects that are realistic for Seattle?
So when you get down into this range, Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa, He's 6'2", 225 to 230, depending on where you're getting your info. Runs with a 4.5, so that's some good speed for a guy that's huge. And he is a guy that loves contact, looks for contact, um,
Where are you
just
going to have to
blows
take
people
him?
over.
You're going to have to
What?
take him with that number 50 pick overall, or slight trade down from there. Where is
You
he
would.
going to be
I think
available?
you're gonna. I think he's gonna be going like probably the 60s somewhere. So if you're sitting at 50, you're like, okay, if we trade down, or maybe we moved off of 18 and we picked up a pick 62 or something. Like it's kind of early, but I think the
Yeah.
beginning around 3. I don't think you take him at 50. That's too early. Because he's not a complete player like you were talking about, in that he isn't a guy that's going to do everything, but what he does, which is run downhill and run people over, he is really good at. He's hard to take down. Um, he runs with tremendous power and great balance. And with that size, his ability to just wear defenses out at the next level, I think he's going to be a good one. He
I
does
do
need
too.
a little bit of a runway to get up to speed, which may not be a great fit in Seattle, where their offensive line is completely crap. Um,
Well,
but
one thing I will say about him, though, that gives me a little hope with a bad offensive line is his offensive line at Iowa. You'd think it'd be a major power rushing offensive line. No, they ran some zone concept type stuff, and his
yep.
holes were fairly small. The cool thing about him and the way that I was watching him was his ability to get really small. Now he's 6 foot 225, but he played
Hmm.
small. He was able to maximize yardage in small spaces and squeeze through spots that just didn't look like there was much room. That was his kind of forte. That's kind of what he did really well. I was impressed by that. I think that's what makes him an intriguing prospect for
What
Seattle, is his vision and decisiveness.
when I was looking at him, what kept standing out is, I'm like, he's playing against, this is Iowa, playing against Big Ten opponents, um, and his offensive line was not as good as Ohio State's defensive line, not anywhere close.
Mm-hmm.
But he was still productive in those games. He found ways to grind out yards, to always fall forward, to bounce off tacklers and get that extra two
Contact
or three
balance.
yards.
Yeah.
And at the next level, like, you're going to have to do that. And in Seattle, with unless they fix their offensive line in a way that I can't see you doing in 1 year, you're going to have to do that. And I think he like that his ability to just keep his contact, keep his pads low, and keep moving, keep his feet grinding, just worked. And I really liked what I saw in him. I don't
I
know
do
if Seattle
too.
goes that early, but god damn,
Yeah. Well,
if he ended up in a Seattle
they've gone
uniform, I'd
second
like
round
it.
running backs 2 years in a row up till
And
last
then not,
year,
yeah, yep,
and then so you just don't know. I mean, that's obviously that's where John Schneider begins to look at value.
hmm
I'm just saying, it's just where he does. We don't necessarily need to agree with him, or everyone that's listening doesn't necessarily need to agree. But that's, you take a look at the trends in the NFL, and it's kind of been interesting, and there are trends. There are certain things that come into play, and running the ball effectively seems to be coming back as part of the importance
hmm
of balancing an offense, and it's been stated that they want to do that in Seattle. So this is, like it or not, is a very important position, and they need, like you said, kind of keep that pipeline going, and it'll be interesting. I do think they're coming out of this draft with a running back,
I would
but
agree. So
I
you
don't
you
know where it's
mentioned
going to be.
Trayvon Henderson out of Ohio State a second ago. His running mate from Ohio State, Quinton Judkins, is also in this draft. I was curious about your opinion on him.
Interesting. I watched both of them, and Henderson's going to be a little bit more upright, a little bit more of a power guy, and Quishon Junkins is 219, but he runs smaller and he's faster. A lot of people that, well, not a lot, but there are some people that have him higher on boards than Henderson.
Hmm.
He's younger prospect at age 21. He's got that burst. Once he breaks into the open, he's kind of got that home run ability. I don't know that Henderson necessarily does. it's hard to tell with the offensive line and the scheme at Ohio State what projects in the NFL. But he's
Mm-hmm.
not a bad guy. Kind of compact, quick feet, gives you a lot receiving out of the backfield, and that's kind of where they used him a lot at Ohio State, was more of that receiver out of the backfield. And he's got low tread on the tire. There, a lot of tread left on the tires, just from a usage standpoint. So yeah. I mean, he'd be an interesting guy. How about you?
Yeah. I He's interesting. I think that he's going to get overdrafted. I think he's going to get drafted in, late round 2, and I wouldn't touch him until late round 3, maybe early round 4, um, because I see a guy that doesn't pass protect real well, and um, someone who just there's a reason why the other guy was the starter and he was the change of pace guy, right? And if I'm building an NFL
It's a
team,
nice problem to have, though, with that
oh hell yeah,
offense.
that offense is pretty good.
And that's why I think that he could be now at this draft spot. No, but if you were to somehow fall into the third round and Seattle had value and he was the guy on their board that was best player on their board or whatever, I wouldn't be shocked, because I do think that he's schematically a good fit for an outside zone scheme, like a Ken Walker replacement after Ken Walker leaves after his final year. And this guy would have a year to acclimate, get used to it. He'd be kind of Kenny McIntosh, compete for those snaps during his first season, and be available in case somebody got hurt above him. Receives the ball out of the backfield really well. So I think he can do those sorts of things. Pass pro is good. Um, Again, I think it's going to be too high for Seattle to be
Yeah.
looking at this point.
Should we talk about Cam Scatabo out
I
of
I
Arizona
like
State?
yeah, I like him, and I saw him in person like in 2 games this year. And I was thoroughly impressed watching him in person, because he wasn't the fastest guy, he's not the biggest guy, but talk about a type of a player that you want to have on your football team. Like, you just want him to be part of your team because he's good at football. And he's the kind of got that warrior mentality. He's got the chip on his shoulder. He's got all the things except for he doesn't have a lot of straight line speed, and he's got a lot of wear and tear on his body, and he will continue to have a lot of wear and tear on his body in the NFL because of just the way that he runs. That warrior mentality, picking up extra yards, taking it to defenders instead of going out of bounds. All those things point to the thought process, to me anyway, that he's going to be a little banged up most of the time. He's either going to have to play through that, or it's going to shorten his career.
Yeah. Yeah. The tread on his tires concern is about the only thing that you really worry about. Honestly, like, is he that much slower than Charbonnet? I don't know. Maybe.
He's not that much slower than Chris Carson. Like, to me, it's a kind of a Chris Carson kind of a
Yeah,
player.
Chris Carson. That is a good fit. Chris Carson was super productive when he was healthy. He just was never healthy. Uh, um, the thing
But he's like
is
a
with
this 4'6" guy, something
yeah,
like that. And so was
he's
Chris
not.
Carson.
Yeah, this isn't a guy that's got special speed or anything. But he's playing at Arizona State. This isn't a big time school, and yet he's just crazy productive against really good defenses. And he just always seems to set up the blocks
Yeah, he's very
well,
patient.
and he's very patient along the line, which you want in a stretch zone scheme. You want some guys that are special. He's a little I think he's a little older, if I remember right. Um
I
and
didn't find an age on him, but I would imagine he's got to be close to 24 based on his years of service.
Yeah, he's a little older, and God, 521 carries over the last 2 years. Like that's just crazy workload for college. Have me concerned, but honestly, he's going to drop. He's going to be a guy that's available later. I really think so, and this is like a Chris Carson pick. You can pick him relatively
Chris
late.
Carson was picked later.
He was a seventh round pick.
This guy is not going to be a seventh round guy, but
He's
in
not.
the fourth round, I think Cameron Scadaboo is a guy that you look at because of the type of player he is, not because necessarily he's going to be the best running back in the
Mm-hmm.
draft. He's going to fit a specific purpose for your team. He's going to have that infectious warrior mentality, and the energy and the competitiveness and the physicality, and then he's going to add that patience. He's going to add that elite contact balance, and when he gets hit, he's going to carry defenders with him. He's going to get the crowd into it. He's going to be a reliable short yardage guy for you, which Seattle has struggled with, especially in the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
I like him. I just don't know if Seattle would pick him. Like I think he's a Mike McDonald kind of a dude. Like, Mike McDonald just loved this dude just because he's a football player.
Yeah.
But is it the best pick Seattle can make out of this draft class? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is a really good draft class. That's part of the reason why I think he's going to be available late. You said fourth round. I was thinking fifth. And he's gonna. I
He's
think
a
because
top
this
100 player. He's a top
is
100
he.
guy. I think
I
he
don't.
is.
I think he's going to go
Think
to the
about the way that he transformed that Arizona State team from being what everyone thought would be maybe a 7-win team this last year to being in the college football playoff series and almost getting it done. And he made that team.
Yeah.
Like he did. Uh, And so I think he can do the same thing in the NFL where he can just kind of will a team forward by just doing everything. And he had 2,000 all-purpose yards for that Arizona team just this year.
Mm-hmm.
1,500 yards rushing, 500 yards receiving. He's a legit player, knows how to do everything really well. I just worry about his longevity in the league as far as his body holding up. But
Yeah.
other than that, man, I think he would go earlier, especially if he ended up having 4.55 speed at the combine.
Oh, yeah.
This kid
If he has a
could
great
rise.
combine workout, he'll rise. I don't see him having a great combine workout. I think he's going to disappoint a little bit, and he's going to fall, and that's why he's going to be down in that late 4, early 5 range. And someone's going to get a steal on him. They may get a steal on him on a guy that only plays for 2 or 3 years at a high level, but you're still going to get a steal. And
He's the type of player that outworks his way into the starting lineup in a significant role with any team that he's on. Like
yep.
he's just going to outwork you. And I wouldn't be disappointed in the pick just because of that. I think that's underrated in the NFL, and that's exactly what Seattle is looking for
Mm-hmm.
in its offense this year. Really?
So it is getting dark here. Give me half a second to turn on a light, and then
Yeah, sure. your your back screen is slowly evaporating. There you go.
Hey, I can see again.
There you
All
go.
right.
Yeah, and
So
your green screen is now better.
yeah, that was actually what cued me in that I should probably
You
have
were
turned on a
melting.
light before we started.
So you say you probably didn't want to look at a guy like Dylan Sampson. I agree.
Yeah,
I think that he does have he's forecast to have 4.35 speed. Let's see. So here's the notes I took on
that's
him
elite
because I did
speed.
take notes on him. I 5'11". I said he looks more like 5'9" on tape. That's my first
Mm-hmm.
note. 190 pounds. That's fine. I said he's got 4.35 40 speed according to Draft Buzz. But when I watched him, I did not see that on tape. Like, I did not see that elite breakaway speed. I saw good speed, like 4.45, 4.5, but not 4.3. And he was taken down from behind like several different times on plays that I watched. And
Mm-hmm.
the nice thing about the upside is he's 20 years old.
Yeah.
You know,
He'll be
but
21 before he takes a snap, but still,
you know,
he's
yeah,
young for
we'll
a
see. We'll
prospect.
see what he looks like at the combine compared to everyone else. I think he's got an opportunity to, have like a zone heavy scheme. I think is a good fit for him. That's why I end up considering some of these guys, even though I'm not used to Seattle drafting a player like this. And so it's hard for me to kind of say that they would, but I don't know. With Klint Kubiak there, Alvin Kamara's not a big running back. Mike McDonald doesn't have a type yet that we have identified. He hasn't really drafted a guy
Kamara also
at
hasn't
this
been
point.
healthy for a season in a long time.
Yeah,
Super talented, but when was the last time he survived a season?
sure. Right. But what I'm saying is, what kind of type are these guys looking for that's going to be able to maximize their offensive scheme? I can't completely answer that yet without going through an off season with them. And so this guy may be a consideration, or a player like this. I just think it would be too early to draft a player like this that's
Mm-hmm.
just scheme specific, does one thing really well, can't be a bell cow guy. He's not going to be on the field for you on 3 downs. I just think it's too early for that. A player that you had in your mock draft when we did our mock draft show, Ollie Gordon is the next player on my board.
Yes.
I love his size, and when you look at him on in the draft, and the reason I think Seattle will not draft him is he looks and reminds me like of Zach Charbonnet. Like he
Yeah.
just runs like him, runs a little upright. He's big, 6'2", 225. Charbonnet is probably 220 at this point, came into the league at 215.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of look the same and they kind of operate the same. They good back, solid. Like, but I think we've already got him on the roster.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that it is a very similar. I mean, if you're Seattle and you're like that is our archetype, and Ken Walker is not for this new offense and the new coaching staff, then okay, then maybe he's in play. And that would be fine. But you're right. He's a very Zach Charbonnet kind of running back. Um, Interestingly, so like on NFL mock draft database, they have him as, he's like the 105th prospect, so just outside the top 100. Um, but if you go and look at like NFL Draft Buzz, they have him on as the 19th best running back, which is putting him like round 6,
Wow.
round 7. Um, which I was like, wow, that is a huge difference between
Discrepancy.
between one site and another, especially since um, mock draft database does pull
I would do this.
from
I would put him above LeQuint Allen, who they have ranked at 13. LeQuint Allen is just not a complete back to me, not at all. I looked
hmm
at him on tape. I would definitely take Ollie Gordon before that. I would take him before Damian Martinez, who I like, but when I watched him on tape, I just didn't like him as much as Ollie Gordon. I would draft Ollie Gordon if we didn't have Charbonnet. I mean, and maybe they do. You said that the archetype. I do think Klint Kubiak came out today and said that he really is looking forward to working with Ken Walker, and to have him in this offense. And it struck me as being, well, he thinks he's a good fit, and I don't
Walk,
disagree with that.
Walker's got special speed. Um, and that he's got good vision. He bounces things well. I think there's a lot to like about Walker, and you see some of his tape and your Kubiak, and you're like, wow, and you just can get excited about it.
Yeah,
But is
if
he
they
gonna?
if they were going to draft somebody, they might draft another Ken Walker as opposed to another Zach Charbonnet. Is
Mhm.
kind of what I was thinking. Um,
So the next guy that I wanted to talk about would be Kalel Mullings out of Michigan,
yeah, I like
because
him.
this guy is 235 pounds. He is
Yeah, and he looks good on tape. I
he
would put him above
freaking
Damian
runs
Martinez.
people
I would put him
over.
above Devin Neal. I would, if you go look at him and above Phil Maffa, although I would like to talk about Maffa because I think that's potentially a good fit. Above Etienne,
Mm-hmm.
Trevor Etienne. I like him a lot. He's ranked like close to the seventh round. Khalil
He's the
Mullins.
and on Draft Buzz, he's the ninth overall running back. He's above all of those guys except for Devin Neal.
So and I tend to agree with him. I don't know about ninth, but I tend to agree that he's above all those other guys. After watching him at 6'2", 233 pounds, he looks every bit of that. He runs a 4.62, so he's not going to be the speedy guy. Although when I watched him, Keith, it wouldn't surprise me if he ran into the 4.5s because on tape he was running away from defensive backs. Scampering down the field after he got through to the second level. And
Mm-hmm.
he looked like a 4 or 5 guy to me. And so I'm going to be very interested in that. But he's got exceptional size, powerful. I really liked him. I thought his feet were nimble. I wrote down the word nimble in tight spaces. But also the physicality, the punishing running style, all of that's there. This to me, so if Seattle was in the marketplace for a identity encompassing running back who would come in and basically would form the identity of the team, this would be my kind of a guy, right? Just a between the tackles running back who could run downhill on you, pick up third downs, be your red zone guy, score touchdowns, all that kind of stuff. I just don't know if Seattle is going to pull the trigger on a guy like this. But I would love it. Like, I would be just like thrilled if he was on the roster.
Yeah. You hear Kubiak talk about Ken Walker, and this is kind of this is a definitely a not Ken Walker type pick, but he is really big. He's really powerful. He does need a little bit of a runway, but damn it, if you give it to him, nobody is. You are he is dragging people and falling forward. He is running over linebackers. A lot of power, just pure power, and the idea of using him in that role, short yardage, or also using him as a fullback at
Yeah.
times, and letting him just clobber someone.
Klint Kubiak
And
did say that he was going to use a fullback in today's press conference.
nice. Fullbacks are so underrated. And you look at what the 49ers have done with Kyle Juszczyk over the few years, and you're like, see that he was such a low pick, and he's been nothing but productive for them, and just so useful. So, I I I know I'm in the minority, but I have no problem with a team carrying a fullback and using that. And this is the kind of guy that I think you could get utility out of as a fullback, but then also as a ball carrier.
And special teams guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
mean, if he's
That's
going to be a fullback for you on the roster, you're either taking away the third or fourth tight end, or you're taking away some other spot that you've had on the roster now for a long time.
mhm.
Which position group would you steal from to add a fullback?
I would steal from running back. Instead of keeping
Would you
four, I'd keep
really? You
three.
keep 3 running backs and a fullback?
Keep run three running back. But if I'm going to do that, though, I'm looking at a fullback that's more than just we're going to use them 3 plays a game type fullback. Like, I want a guy that we can use as a lead blocker, that can pick up a blitz, that I can get the ball to out of the backfield. Um, go back a little bit in Seahawks history, and Max Strong, right?
Yeah.
Great at blitz
John
pickup,
L.
ran a
Williams.
draw really well, but also a fantastic lead blocker, and can catch the ball. Like, he is what I want in a fullback if I'm going to have a fullback on my roster. And he then takes the place of that fourth running back because he does things for you that a running back does.
Are you saying that Khalil Mullins could become that in the
I
right
think he
situation?
I think he can. You never know with the running back if they're going to make a good fullback. until you have them do it, because their instincts are to avoid that linebacker. Whereas as a fullback, your job is to engage that linebacker.
Well,
But when
he's got experience as a linebacker, like,
yeah,
and he's got above average pass protection skills already.
and I just think that honestly, I really like his game. I think he's very
I do too.
versatile. You can put him as an H back. You can put him at a tight end at times. He can be your tailback and run people over. Like, I think you're going to be able to use him as a fullback. I think that he would be a fantastic addition to Seattle's roster. He's going to be a fantastic addition to anybody's roster.
And he's been durable. I mean, he hasn't missed any games.
Yep.
He's, yeah, I agree. I think he's underrated, actually.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for the speed, I think he'd be way up on people's draft boards. But if he's available in the 5th or 6th round, I think this is the type of guy, given the idea that potentially he could be a fullback as well, could be something that Klint Kubiak could work with, like
Yeah,
in
because
that
if
mold. Like he spent some time there with Kyle Shanahan in San
yeah,
Francisco
who
with
had
their
Kyle
fullback.
Juszczyk? Yeah,
And so this guy's not too much smaller than that, right?
he's about the well, yeah, he's about 5 pounds lighter.
235, 235, 237 is where you want to be. 6'2". I mean, with that linebacker background, yeesh,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. I
I
like
mean,
it.
I'm looking. I if you want to carry a fullback, how many plays a game are you getting that fullback as a fullback, not special teams?
Well,
Um,
10.
and see, that's the thing is, if it's 10, that makes it they better be really good at special teams, because it makes it hard to carry that position. Um, but if you've got a guy who can play that, but also, if somebody gets hurt, still be your tailback, because that's who he is, and
Yes.
he's got all sorts of versatility, then okay, like I think that it makes it a lot easier to carry that fullback. Now, Kyle Juszczyk doesn't play 10 snaps a game. When he's healthy, he plays 25 to 30. Um,
Well, the way that
so
Kubiak described the way that he uses that position, he said that he often brings a tight end into the backfield, and maybe that's because of the personnel that he has on his roster, um, or it's just the way that he runs motions and so forth out of
honestly,
12 and 13 personnel. But
if you're going to
I'm
do
not
that
sure.
and you're going to pull Barner back into the backfield, um, and let him be the lead blocker for any running back, I'm not going to complain. I think that could be fun. That can be a lot of fun to watch.
So the last running back that I had on my list that I wrote notes for was Raheem Rocket Sanders, running back out of South Carolina, 6 foot, 230 pounds. Again, there are so many guys like this in this draft. I want one. I want one of these guys because I don't know why, but I've been coveting a back that really can just be physical for so long, and we just haven't had that. Charbonnet's great. Don't get me wrong. There's just another extra element and level when you have a guy that's like 15 pounds heavier than Charbonnet.
Mm-hmm. I
And
can
this
just
guy he
run
still
people
runs a
over. Yeah.
4.440 as well. He's a little
Yep.
older, 22, almost 23 years old, but that's why he's going to be available in, the back end of the 6th round, 7th round. Productive, can receive the ball out of the backfield, huge frame. I think that he still has all that agility. Fun runner to watch. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you go out and watch him, he's just built different, and he carries himself really well, and he's got that extra speed that some of the other guys this size just don't have. So it's a nice combo.
Um, yeah, this is a guy that craves contact, to the point where there are some plays where it's like you didn't have to run into that linebacker. You could have, used your running lane, but he went looking for contact and hit someone. Um, he's a football player. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. He may not be the best running back, but he is a football player who loves contact, and um, I'm not going to complain about that. Running backs that that shy away from contact they kind of bug me. And that's this is a post Marshawn Lynch thing. Lynch would run anybody over, and I respected so much that like it didn't matter. Yeah, he could step out of bounds, but he's not going to. He's going to go hit someone. Um, and this is that kind of guy. He just loves contact. Um,
So there's a couple other guys I wanted to talk about actually.
we didn't talk about Devin
That I
Neal. We skipped
well,
him,
I like Devin Neal.
which
Okay,
is
so we'll come back to him in just a second. But I
okay.
want to talk about two guys that are similar in size but different types of runners. So Phil Maffa and
Mm-hmm.
Damian Martinez. Now I've liked Damian Martinez for a while now because he's become my mock draft favorite guy to plug in at a certain spot in the draft where he seems to always be available, and he's just kind of a good value pick in the 5th round or whatever. And so I always kind of plug him in, and I've looked at his tape, and he's been okay, but I went and compared him directly with Phil Maffa. So for me, Damian Martinez is 6 foot. They list him at 232 on tape. I think he looks closer to 220 pounds, and he plays like it. He plays like it, and he runs a 4.55 40. He's 21 years old. Lots to like there. Started at Oregon State. Some people may recognize him from Oregon State. Played a couple years there. Finished it out at Miami. I thought he kind of had a letdown year in Miami, but they had a lot of talent there around him. He kind of had to. So anyway, I think he could be a zone guy. I think he can be a 3 down back in the league, but I don't really like his style. Phil Maffa, on the other hand, from Clemson, 6'1", 230 pounds, looks like he's 230 pounds, much thicker build, especially on the lower half, got sand in his pants, as they like to say. He shows up in a much more physical running style than Martinez. So if Seattle's in the market for a mid-round, late-round running back in this type of mold, I'd rather go with a guy like Phil Maffa,
Oh, I
bruising
agree.
downhill runner,
Yeah,
red zone guy. Martinez has got the better draft stock, but Phil Maffa to me is the better prospect.
I would agree with that. I think that he is going to just run people over, and um, I'm all for guys that run people over. Um,
Okay, Devin Neal, Kansas.
yeah, because we kind of somehow we missed one of the top running backs in this class, um, and a
I think
guy that I think
he's listed as
both of us like.
5'11", but I think he's closer to 5'10", just looking at him.
Yeah, that seems right. 215 pounds. So he's not huge like the guys we've been talking about. But this is a guy who catches the ball out of the backfield really well. You can play him, the screen game. You can line him up in the slot. You can line him up outside. But he's not like that little scat back, gadget player. He can line up um, and run the ball between the tackles too. Really thrives as a one cut and go guy, which is what you need in a zone stretch system. A guy that's going to glide along the line, wait for that seal block, and then cut up right behind it and just go. Um, and I think that his vision's great. He's the ability to make people miss, and he does that with 215 pounds. Um, he plays like a guy who is 195 pounds in terms of pass catching and
He's
blocking
like
whatever they
Kenny
think. Oh, third down
McIntosh.
block. Yeah, but he's 10 pounds heavier than
He
Kenny
is 10 pounds
McIntosh.
heavier than he's 10 pounds heavier and has about the same speed. Um, yeah. I mean, if you can upgrade Kenny McIntosh. Now, Kenny McIntosh didn't have a lot of opportunity last year. When he did come in,
Yep.
I thought he played well. Kind of ran harder than Ken Walker did in kind of the same sort of games with the same
Hmm.
offensive line, defensive line combos and stuff. And I thought, well, maybe there's something there. Because this is really the first year he had an opportunity to really play. Devin Neal reminds me of Kenny McIntosh a little bit as far as his skill set. But
Hmm.
Devin Neal looks to me to be the better prospect. I just don't know if it's a big enough gap to where they draft him.
Yeah. I don't think they're gonna pick a running back high enough to get him. because he's a guy that's going to go probably second round, maybe third. I think he's going to go pretty high, and I'm like, oh, Seattle's probably not going to go after a guy like that. Um, and I'm okay with that, but he's still a really interesting player. And then you just got me
Yeah.
really excited about Phil Maffa. I just in my head, I'm like, God
You
damn,
gotta,
I
yeah,
really
Phil
want him on the
Moffa's
roster
the
right now.
Phil Moffa. So, dude, I wasn't expecting anything, and I hadn't really scouted him, and I was like, okay, Damian Martinez, I'm gonna go check him out, and I did, and I was like, okay, Phil Moffa, I gotta see what this guy's all about as well, and I was like, wow, this is a guy that I need to look at a little bit more closely because he just ran like the size he was listed at, and he,
Mm-hmm.
the kind of the downhill style, the in between the tackles, he could receive out of the backfield. He had some burst to him, even though he runs a 4.55. He still had a burst, so his long speed isn't great, but he still was able to wiggle and get to the second level pretty quickly. Um, and I liked that, and I think that he's a guy that I think could fit both styles of blocking schemes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Zone and gap. And I think
Yeah.
you need a running back, even when you're doing outside zone or zone blocking. Even a guy like Kubiak runs that system 70% of the time. And the other 30% of the time he's running gap stuff or pin and pull and all the other types of options that you have in your blocking. So you do need some diversity, I think, in the type of running backs that you have on your roster. And to me, we don't have a Phil Moffa on the roster.
Yeah. And I mean, if you have a guy like that, I mean, you can use them in a lot of different ways. I'm saying you get guys that are that big, hey, we can run, we can use him as a tight end. We can put him as an H back. We can like move him around and do different things. Can you imagine
Yes. Yes.
a guy that size catching the ball on a swing pass out of the backfield with the defensive, like a safety or a cornerback out there to try and tackle him one on one?
I love it. Yeah.
That defensive back's gonna crap their pants
Well, and
watching
the
him
nice thing
come
about a
run.
guy like Phil Moffa is you can pick him up in the fifth round, sixth round, and he could
Hmm.
develop. I mean, this is a guy that doesn't have a lot of wear on him, and a couple of years in your system, he's taken over for a guy like Charbonnet that's in the contract year that maybe we don't want to pay, a second contract too. And, I'm just thinking ahead. So is John Schneider. And now the nice thing about running backs is you don't have to think too far ahead because there's always another class the next year. And there's so many running backs and so many options that I think maybe you don't carry a running back on your roster a year ahead before you actually need them. That you can make an argument for that. But yeah, guy like Phil Maffa, guy like Mullins, I like and would enjoy having on the roster for sure. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I think we're wrapped up. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think we actually went through this a little quicker than I expected because there's
So
just
many.
so many names. But ultimately, like, this is a good year to pick up a back because you don't have to go overdraft one to get a guy. Like, when the
So
Seahawks
true.
drafted Charbonnet in round two, it wrinkled a lot of people because it's like, why would you draft someone that early? But that draft class was pretty weak as far as running backs go. So if you wanted a guy that could come in and make an impact, you were gonna have to spend some draft capital on him. I don't think you have to in this draft because there's a lot of running back talent. And if you can get a guy couple guys we mentioned, you're talking about Phil Maffa, and I brought up Khalil Mullings out of Michigan. If you can get one of those two guys in the fifth round, you're not giving up much in terms of draft capital, but you might be getting someone with the talent to give you um, what you got out of a second round pick in a previous draft. So I like this draft for Seahawks getting a running back. I hope they do. I hope they take advantage of the depth and get someone in fourth or fifth, sixth round that can come in and make an impact.
So quickly, talk to me about your philosophy on taking advantage of a strong draft class at a certain position group. There are, certain players that like to zig when others zag and so forth. And John Schneider does that once in a while. If
Mm-hmm.
there's a really good class of tackles, offensive tackles, he might go in a different direction and take a look at defensive backs or wide receivers or whatever, just because there's a run on tackles. He may
Yeah,
not
because if
elect to
there's
do
that,
that.
it depends on the position. So at tackle or corner or defensive end, right? These are guys that if there's that many good ones, they're going to go and they're going to go early and often. And a whole bunch of um, good players at other positions are going to fall because everyone's grabbing those, but a running backs are a devalued position, right? So no one's going to go out and like, oh, there's a bunch of this is a really good running back class. Let's go draft one in the second round. Not when you can get an equal talent in round 4. Um, and so in this case, it plays the other thing is you can wait it out because even if 10 running backs go in the first 3 rounds, guess what? There's still 12 that you really like for day 3. Um, and so in terms of this, like, you wait it out. I will say though that sometimes you can overthink things a little bit. A couple of years ago, there was a really, really good wide receiver draft, and the Seahawks did not get a wide receiver in it. And
I remember that. There's like
and
23 wide receivers taken in the first 4 rounds or something like that. It was crazy.
yeah, and the Seahawks did not get a wide receiver in the entire round. And you could tell on the field the next year, it's like, wow, they needed more weapons out there for Russ, and um, didn't have it. And then the following year they had to trade up for DK Metcalf, which has worked out really well for them. But um, sometimes, when you have a great class like that, you don't want to get out of the draft without one because, again, you can get a player which in other drafts would be a third round pick. You can get in the 5th round in this draft. It's value. You got to take it. Take advantage of it.
All right. I think we're going to leave it there. It was good to talk to you about this class. It's fun. This whole process is fun. Next time we come back, I think we're on tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
Take a look at the tight end class and talk about the depth there. I like this class through about round 4. Haven't really
And
studied it too far beyond that.
yeah, it's got some good talent. I don't know if it has the depth of other position groups. If you need a tight end, you're probably going to have to draft one on day 2. That's
Agreed.
my early take. I still have a lot of scouting to do. I still have a lot of scouting to do.
Well, if you want a
Um,
tight end that has impact, now if you want a receiving type tight end, you're going to have to do, and you want them to be on the field in 2025, you're going to have to draft one in the second round or the
mhm.
third round, I think, because there's not that many after that are going to be, starter or heavy rotation guys. Now, if you want an inline blocking kind of guy, you can get those guys still in the 4th, 5th
Yeah,
round.
true.
But we'll see
There's
how it
also
goes.
I don't know. Well, like I said, I still have a lot of scouting to do, but my initial impression is there's no Brock Bowers in this draft, and
I don't know
some
about
we'll
that.
see.
I mean, there's a
All
couple of
right.
guys that are going to go in the first round that I really like. I mean, Tyler Warren, I've
Well,
looked at tape on him already. He's a guy that reminds me of Brock Bowers that I
well,
think is going to really be a star in this league.
we will have that debate in our next show because yeah,
Okay, that sounds good.
cool, fun.
So find Keith on Blue Sky at Myers NFL. You can find me at Blue Sky at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platforms and our YouTube channel. Make sure you share it, like it, subscribe, leave a comment, all that good stuff. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.